Okay, for you guys that don't have muscle ups, maybe this is a chance to, you know, get pumped, get a group of people around you and just get your first muscle up. You can either do it with a false grip, which is usually something that we do more dead hang. There's a little kip, but we always see a dysfunction happening there. So if you're doing a kip, I ideally recommend a non-false grip. But what we're gonna talk about is, hey, how can we do something that's intermediate? Not a crazy false grip where I'm in this really highly active position and not a broken wrist position, something a little bit more intermediate. So what we see in gymnastics is, if you come over here to the rings, is when we hang from the rings, we don't hang with our wrists right underneath the rings. We actually hang in a semi-false grip. And if you look at my wrist there, there's a little bit of flexion going on. And that little bit of flexion is enough to just give you some support and some good grip and better positioning as you go into the transition. So start thinking about how you're holding on to the rings. If you're doing a non-false grip muscle up, you're gonna wanna over grip it a little bit. Again, a semi-false grip or just a nice strong grip. This right here is actually a broken wrist while hanging, and you don't have any progression out of that. That's just not working for you. Here, I actually have some strength, and I can actually translate into some other business. Another thing to think about is when I'm holding on to the rings, this is my hook grip when I'm hanging. On the bar, we would do thumb underneath the finger, index finger or middle finger too, whatever you got. But for rings or for anything on a bar that allows us to place the bar inside of our hand and close the fist, what we're looking at is thumb on top of the index finger and middle finger. That will give me a nice hook on the ring. So I'm here, I'm gonna wrap my thumb around and I'll hang. That's gonna lock me out and get me into a stronger wrist. If I let go of that, most likely my wrist is gonna drop and now I don't have that big connection that I want. So slightly overhand, get that thumb around, hang, and now I'm strong in that position. So try that, see how that feels. Do a couple kipping pull-ups on the rings, couple of hips to rings pull-ups, and then your transition, of course, is the quickest sit-up you've ever done. All the progression videos are up, so just think about that. Warm up was just big kip, hips to rings. That's gonna be your first pull for the muscle up, and the second pull is gonna be your transition, which is just the quickest sit-up you've ever done. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this actually over here to our little parallel bars, and we're gonna start talking about this. So one of the things that we see is that our athletes always have a hard time with transition. Transition from an upper arm position to the bottom of the dip is just the quickest sit-up you've ever done. Key thing is that if your shoulders are tight and you're lacking this internal rotation, you can't get or achieve this external rotation or elbow in position. The transition is way harder because it forces you to go higher and then dip down. The more mobile you are in the shoulders, the lower you can go, and the more room you have to accomplish that transition. Notice I'm not going very high, just enough to get myself up and over. So that's something to think about. If you have some bars, get into an upper arm position, active shoulder, big transition. This is just an upper arm to bottom of your dip. Another thing you can do is, if you watch me from the side here, we can use the bars actually as a little drill for muscle ups. So if I'm hanging here with my hands on the inside, oh, that's my turnout at the bottom, that's my lockout, I can just work on some kips, kip, jump, kip, jump. Feel comfortable with that? Kip, jump, receive an upper arm. That is my first pull. Can I get my shoulders past the rings? Can I get my hands close to my hips? If I have that, I would go into upper arm. If I feel comfortable with that, I want to try to do the full transition. Transition was from upper arm to bottom of the dip. In this case, I'm going to miss the upper arm, and I'm going to go straight into transition. I'm hanging, big swing, up, transition. Up, transition. That right there is a great way to just prep the movement, but without fatiguing yourself for the workout.